Welcome to this Language Point video course focused on how to teach tenses. We'll take each of the English tenses one by one in these videos, and we'll start by looking at some background to the tenses and how they're used. We'll look at some student difficulties with these forms, and then we'll move on to think about the concept behind the tense. We'll do this by using timelines. Then we'll focus on the syntax and word order involved in forming the structure of the tenses, and we'll look at some sentence examples to put the grammar into context. Finally, I'll suggest some research tasks for you to put what you learn into practice and apply the knowledge about tenses into your own teaching. So it's important to remember that, as with any grammar, we'll teach tenses by starting with a strong context. Once you've set the context where this tense is naturally used, you can introduce the concept of the tense itself. Remember, teach the meaning before the form. Hold off on mentioning the actual structure itself and how it's formed until the students have a really strong grasp on why we use it. It's also important to remember that the tenses of English have an order of complexity. So it's important to start with the simpler tenses and build on student knowledge bit by bit until they can work up to the more complex forms. Some of the concepts behind English tenses don't exist in other languages, and they're actually pretty conceptually difficult to grasp. So it's important that we start simple and move on to more complex forms. This is reflected in the order of the videos as we present them on this course. It's also important that students understand the notions of time, tense, and aspect as they're learning these tenses. As students get more familiar with these concepts, they'll be able to apply what they know to compare and contrast the different tenses of English, which again may not exist in their language, so it's really important that they can do this. Once they can make an informed decision about which tense to use, that's the basic part of starting to learn how to apply and use those tenses in their everyday language. So finally, I hope you enjoy this series of videos and you find it useful in your own teaching. If you follow the research tasks and apply what you learn in the materials that you use every day in your classroom, you should find that your students get more comfortable with these tenses and benefit in the long run.